of you for being here. Yes, before we start, I would just like to let you know that we will be recording this session for knowledge purposes as well. So thank you so much to each and every one of you for being a part of this event. My name is Ms. Nida Riaz and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of HR Metrics. So each year, basically, Women's Day is celebrated on the 8th of March. The concept of this event is to basically celebrate and honor the social, economic, and the political achievements that women throughout the world have been achieving. Women from different backgrounds participate in this event and have a sincere effort to promote this because sincerity lies with them to promote this. So the topic of discussion, we have amazing panelists and keynote speakers today. So the topic of discussion, the theme today that we're going to be talking about is gender equality today for a sustainable tomorrow. Sir, can we move towards the next slide, please? So as Mr. Zahid already mentioned that the program agenda for today, but I'll make you go through all of the people that are just joining in right now. So the program is today divided into two segments. Segment 1 and segment 2. The segment 1 includes the keynote speakers talk, which is going to be from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. The segment 2 is the dialogue by the panelists, which is going to be from 6 and going move towards 7:30 p.m. The segment 1 initially, as Sir mentioned, we had 3 keynote speakers, but due to the commitment of Dr. Sania Nishtar with the Prime Minister at a very short notice, she was unavailable to attend it. But yes, we will be hearing from her in the near future, inshallah. So right now we will be having the keynote talk with Dr. Shamshad Akhtar. Assalamu alaikum, ma'am. Chairman, Pakistan Stock Exchange, and Ms. Sadia Khan, Commissioner Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan. The second segment, as I mentioned before, is going to be the dialogue by the panelist. Mr. Sajid Aslam, that is ACCA Global Head, Public Policy, will be the moderator of this segment. We will have dialogue by the following panelists in this segment, such as Ms. Musharaf Hai, former CEO Unilever and L'Oreal, Jahan Araf, founder and CEO Catalyst Labs, Muniza Butt, partner KPMG, Fatma Asad Said, CEO Abescus Consulting, and lastly, Maliha Mimi Bangesh, IFC, expert digital finance. Moving forward, I would like to shift the presenter rights to Sir Zahid Mubarak. He is basically CEO HR Metrics, Co-Director Center for Global Inclusion. He is going to be the moderator of the first segment. So sir, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Nida, for the wonderful start. And once again, I'm thankful to distinguished speakers and valued participation for being together this evening. As you know, my name is Zahid Mubarak, and I'm the heading this company, HR Metrics, also on the board of directors in the Center for Global Inclusion. This program is taking place from the platform of the HR Metrics. So I would like to give you a very brief overview, although most of you are familiar with the mandate of this company. This is an advisory consulting and a training firm, having expertise in 4 areas. People analytics, this was the philosophy on which we established this company, that is to connect the dots between human capital performance and organizational performance in measurable terms. Secondly, we are the first one to promote global HR competency standard in Pakistan. HR traditionally was regarded as a generic profession, and SHRM, which is the 70 years old organization in the United States, having presence in more than 180 countries, 306,000 members. So they developed a global HR competency standards with some customization that we introduced in Pakistan. We also launched global DEI standard. In Pakistan, this was developed by the Center for Global Inclusion, USA, and this has been developed by 112 global experts, including myself. Third thing is the overall HR standards. So far, more than two dozen global HR standards have been developed. Our focus is more on the HR data analytics, and I personally contributed to developing this global HR standards. And this standard was considered as a reference point by the various regulators around the world, including the Securities and Exchange Commission USA, for making a regulation on the human capital disclosure. And now this regulation is being revised, likely going to be revised in the context of the ESG framework. As a part of our portfolio of services, the diversity and inclusion that we offer to the organizations, where we have served 49 organizations in Pakistan in terms of their onboarding and utilization of the global DEI standards. At the same time, we offer in this program, Women for Board. This is a platform where we encourage and facilitate the senior women to become member board of directors. So currently we are developing a directory to offer it to the corporate. And our goal is the placement of the women in the leadership role, and not just to comply with the SECP regulation, but we encourage organizations to consider women beyond compliance more of an asset and true value added and a contributor in the organizations. So in that context, some of the we have a steering committee, and it's being led by Musharaf Hai. I'm grateful to her for her support and the guidance, and all other members for their patronage. So in this context, we organize various events, face-to-face events, the online events, where we encourage this kind of dialogue discussion, followed by some of the practical steps which can lead to the growth of women at particularly the governance level, and also the other initiatives focus at the operation level. So this is a glimpse from some of the past programs. Today's program, it has I would say, a galaxy of speakers. And fortunately, everybody is together, except with the dropout of one speaker. And the names are already there on the screen. So the structure of the program is that would be, we will have the Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, Chairperson, Pakistan Stock Exchange, as the first keynote speaker. She has a very versatile career. She has the honor of being the first woman governor of the Pakistan Central Bank, and also the interim finance minister. She served as the Under Secretary and Executive Director of the United Nations Asia and Pacific Regional Commission, leading work on the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, climate change, and financing for the development. She is now serves on the few global and the regional advisory councils and heads a few Pakistani companies board. So without taking any further time, I would like to request Dr. Shamshad to please start sharing with us her views on the overall subject of this International Women's Day. Thank you so much. Over to you, Dr. Shamshad.
Okay. Good evening already to all the distinguished speakers, and Zahid, it's a delight to again be able to interface with you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and wish you all very well this evening. Congratulations to all of you for the International Women's Day 2022, Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. We celebrated this yesterday at the Pakistan Stock Exchange platform, and also I went over to Sui Southern Gas Company to celebrate there. Some of the speakers here may have been there, so I apologize for some repetition that they may face. But I have to say, I think the theme selected for this year is a powerful, all-encompassing, multidimensional, and of course, inclusive. It's correlated with some of the previous themes. And as I stated on other platforms, progress on gender equality helps drive productivity and economic growth, firms' enterprise development and profitability, as well as promotes social cohesion. So for example, as some years back, when I was the Sherpa for G20, there was one particular evidence that came to surface by the work that they had done, that the global GDP would increase by about 12 trillion by 2025 through reducing gender gaps and promoting women's economic empowerment, such as participation in the workforce or presence in leadership positions. Similarly, implementing policy reforms to increase women's participation in the labor force would increase growth in the US by 5%, Japan by 9%, but in an emerging market case such as Egypt by 34%. So women's participation is a very powerful um, uh, has a very powerful impact on the economies. However, low participation of women is a drag on Pakistan's economy and its corporate sector. While there is a broad-based advocacy and value proposition of the virtue of gender SDGs and indicators, it has to be recognized that our country has been late starter and lagged behind other comparator countries in mainstreaming SDGs, be it in the fiscal module or financial sector. Like other nations, post-pandemic, Pakistan is now aspiring for a sustainable and inclusive recovery that creates opportunities for all. However, this requires urgent action on gender equality, which requires fostering economic and climate resilience, given poverty and vulnerability is pervasive across all the women in Pakistan, as well as in other developing countries. So it's imperative for all of us to recognize the significance and urgency of fast tracking the implementation of SDG 5. And as I said yesterday, half other SDGs that have the potential to reinforce gender equality, including the SDG that deals with inequalities, um, and it covers the inequalities of income, opportunities, etc., etc. So it's an interrelated and reinforcing agenda. So whether we work on SDG 5 or we work on the other half, including the SDG 11 of climate, we would make a difference in the lives of women. So in order to embark seriously on gender equality, both public and private sector need to do a better job of mainstreaming gender through a holistic policy, legal, and regulatory framework that subscribe to a long-term vision of gender equality. No small quick fixes will move the needle because gender equality is a very, very long-term agenda. The best we can do is fix in the short term on the corners and the edges, as I see. So when I say that we need to do a better job of mainstreaming gender, I really mean policy reforms, legal and regulatory framework reforms. And within that, there is a lot of granular details that one needs to go. But in interest of time, I will not deep dive into this, but say that gender equality is a long-term vision and an agenda. However, we need to keep on chipping off all the issues and problems. One of the things it's important to recognize that gender equality requires working simultaneously, if nothing else, on women's leadership and economic empowerment, because it drives the gender equality, which requires, in our case in Pakistan, an effective federal, provincial, and local governments coordination, which, as we all know, since we are all from Pakistan, that it is very tenuous and fragmented. It has to be instrumental because removing legal barriers facing women requires a cohesive and harmonized parliament, if nothing else. We also need to have common frameworks for education, health, and environment, which are all instrumental for uplift of women. And of course, this social sector being provincial subjects, it is a nightmare to deal with the differences and the fragmentation. So let me move to a point on the pandemic. As we all know, unprecedented pandemic and the crisis it has unleashed had a disproportionate impact on women and has deepened the gender gaps. We already have big gender gaps. You all are familiar with the index, so I don't need to go there. But with the pandemic persisting, World Economic Forum estimates that at the current rate of progress, it'll take almost 267.6 years to close the economic gender gap. And who knows what it would be for us, possibly longer, because we are at the lower end of the ladder. Pandemic, of course, has offered new approaches and modalities for offering economic and empowerment opportunities, which if effectively implemented will impact gender gap. So what is required from HR firms? Of course, Zahid's HR firm is quite unique, but there are several other HR firms. They need to work in partnership with the public and private sector to embed and harness well-targeted policies and interventions that drive coherently and consistently the goal and targets of gender equality and integrate it into the COVID-19 response and recovery policies, or for that matter, if we have the foresight to ensure that we nurture preparedness of women for climate crisis or any other hazards that could hit us, because now we have learned in hindsight that health crisis and other types of crisis are more lethal than the economic and financial crisis. So we have to prepare women who are the most vulnerable segment of our society. It's well recognized that Pakistan is the 5th most climate vulnerable country and is prone to transboundary challenges as a whole, as whole belt of South Asia has an exceptional rise in temperature and sea level rises, and so on and so forth. I think it's important that all of us, when we are dealing with the corporate sector or we are dealing with the question of the board, that we talk about the broader dimension of the vulnerabilities that women face, because I don't think it would take one body or one segment to fix this problem. Of course, the boards play a very critical role, but in my experience, both working at the boards, that actually boards, to the extent they are occupied by men, will have a male bias than a female bias. So hence, I am trying to bring in the women's vulnerability to be addressed by the board. So across public sector, before we get into the private sector, there's need to, of course, fiscalize gender goals and targets and link it with performance indicators. Obviously, we have done some lip service in some countries, but what's encouraging that overnight, I saw this very recent IMF paper, which has done a survey of the G20, and it's found that only less than half of them have even been able to do gender budgeting, a topic which was extremely popular. And when I say gender budgeting, I also mean corporate sectors allocation for meeting the gender goals and targets, because I was talking to some corporate leaders and they ended up just telling me that, oh, we are using our CSR funds. This is an apologetic attitude if you use CSR funds to address SDGs or gender equality. Honestly, I felt very, I was pretty cross, but I tried to control it because I am pretty passionate about women's subject. I think in the gender assessment, like when I was working as an economist and doing gender budgeting, we insisted that we had the civil society involved in gender budgeting and monitoring. And involved in the consultation. So let me now jump to the private and the financial sector initiative. Among others, there has been substantial initiatives to promote innovative digital financial services, where obviously I am going to talk more about the companies I'm affiliated with, where Karandas has played an instrumental role, an entity where that Sadia was affiliated and one of the founding members. So we have tried to promote innovative digital financial services. We have developed the micropayment gateway, which is the Bill, Melinda and Gates Foundation's financial support, the grant. It'll go a long way to enhance financial inclusion. We have been working on the regulatory framework of e-banking, which has already been introduced by the central bank. Fintech and tech firms and startups are sprouting, and Karandas is looking at options to support this. The enhanced infrastructure is, of course, going to be used by the government to offer relief to the public in different ways on financial inclusion. And if Sania was here, she would have talked about what wonders the digital platform is helping her in the social safety net. Karandas, to its credit, has established microfinance bank, and it's laid the foundation for the first SME company, holistic company, to offer finance, preferably to women entrepreneurs. And we are about to establish a credit guarantee SME company, besides the infrastructure credit enhancement company, which has already jump-started, but SME credit guarantee is still in the process of the paperwork. So that is going to make a difference to gender, all the enumeration that I have laid out up there. In recent years, there is a growing recognition that nurturing capital markets ecosystem can facilitate financial inclusion process significantly. And I talked about this yesterday at the PSX platform. It's an untapped but a high potential area. The capital markets ecosystem, if structured effectively, will have a high payoffs in terms of reducing gender disparities. And when I talk about it, we always talk about bread and butter. So, within stock exchange, the brokers are not interested in women's participation in the, that I didn't say at PSX yesterday, but I'm saying it here. They're not interested in finding women investors or women issuers. They are just interested in making more and more money out of stock exchange and working in terrible circumstances now, given the macroeconomic environment is pretty dire. Stock exchanges, of course, are in a unique position as their power of listing and trading and attracting public to invest offers it an edge to integrate sustainability and diversity in its companies and businesses. It's not happening, but I am not going to stop pushing. If we manage our capital markets in business as usual manner, it would be a pity, frankly, for women. So first of all, we all recognize all the women here are very learned. They all know that there are a broad range of products, equity and debt, but also high tech and innovative startups where gender edge helps. So we had a dialogue with startups just about last week, and I was able I noticed that there were only 2, but very accomplished women who were a breath of fresh air to hear. Pakistan's companies and markets, of course, would need to embrace steadily, but holistically, sustainability and ESG business across its company. If you read any literature on ESG, given that environment, social, governance, all are integrated and tie up effectively, that they reinforce and are very catalyzing for gender. So in this context, I have already indicated to the PSX, which is a listed company itself, to join the League of the Sustainable Stock Exchanges and offer guidance to companies on data development. I also have been encouraging the development of data and evaluate how it serves the ESG. All three pillars, as I have pointed out, E, S, and G, serve women, and ensure it monitors progress and reports on companies' compliance with ESG that, among others, offers as a powerful approach to women empowerment. As you may have already heard, PSX has established a GEM board. It has had already a couple of listings. And unfortunately, yesterday, one of the listings was withdrawn because of the macroeconomic complications, which are impacting the stock exchange very adversely. That this GEM board will serve women entrepreneurs and technology more and more, but it also depends on our asset management companies and our brokers to bring in women from all corners, because of course you have to prepare these companies. They provide concessional listing fees and all kinds of privileges there, simpler regulatory frameworks. So I have been involved in the sustainable stock exchange debates and the Global Compact and the United Nations, because as you know, there is a private sector United Nations Compact, and United Nations started this Sustainable Stock Exchanges initiative. And I think what is going on there is very instrumental, that there is an advisory board of the World Federation of Exchange that is working in close alliance with the IFC, and that is helping technically exchanges to promote sustainability, gender. And of course, we have the option to look at debt instruments, and SECP needs to be recognized for releasing the gender bond architecture, but we need also principles and guidelines for social bonds and sustainability linked bonds and all the other attractive bonds, where when I was doing a paper on the green financing, it's amazing, almost 1 billion and now 130 trillion has been committed by the institutional investors for some of these tasks by the work of Mark Carney, who was the former governor of the Central Bank of England, and before that in Canada, and he was appointed as advisor for climate change by the Secretary General when I was there, and he's a remarkable person given his phenomenal financial sector background and the standard setting work that he has done at the FSP, including the establishment of the Financial Services Board. So as these initiatives that I have talked about are fully operationalized, new economic opportunities will emerge, and they will generate the demand for it, because we are working from the supply side. But for generating demand, we need the support of HR firms, because they need to coordinate with the private and the public companies and financial institutions to reach out to women and ensure they package the required capacity building for women to avail these services to reshape gender parity. I'm on another board, which is the Pakistan Institute of Corporate Governance, a gift by Sadia Khan. Now I can't tell her anything because she's the commissioner of SECP, so I can't be critical of her at all. But she, at her departure, gifted me PICG, and she knows that I will never forgive her for that because it's a lot of work. But I have to say there are partners in the ESG proposition with the PSX, and Sadia has had her briefing from all of us. We have a lot of partners who are working with us, CFA, ACCA, and ICAP are involved with us. They are bringing in their expertise on the ESG, but also I'm using PICG to broaden the course mandate, which goes beyond corporate governance now, to teaching the SMEs on how to go about corporate governance. And we have lowered the fees for women who may be interested in attending the corporate governance by 50%. I told Asan Jamil to actually give women free corporate governance courses, but he obviously has to have manage the financial accounts, which are not necessarily very attractive given when you do advisory support work. So both public and private sector have to work together to promote what has now been famously called accelerator model, which is a global model adopted by a range of countries and requires fostering strong collaboration across sectors to launch reforms of institutional structures and cross-sector policies and incentives in order to bring about change in the internal governance and a change in the external governance and a system transformation to change tradition, norms, and attitudes while offering reskilling opportunities. So, I get once a call from XYZ company, I'd like to jump in. I'm doing my own ESG work, or I'm doing this. I have to say, I don't appreciate that very much. I think we should all work as a team. The Pakistan problems are so phenomenal that working in isolation will not help, and you won't be able to move a needle at all. So finally, I'm going to bring in the topic, which is very close to the heart of Zahid, and he had co-opted me to work on this and to support. And it's not as if I haven't thought through about it, but from gender equality, we have to move to gender equity. We need fairness, we need dignity, we need to kill all the sexual harassment cases that are happening in different dimensions. We need he and she platforms to really raise the voice. And it's not just about going and standing outside in the heat and having slogans, but to do solid, thoughtful work in these areas. Employers who practice equal opportunity have access to larger, more diverse and higher quality workforce. And when I interviewed some of the large resourceful companies, I have to say, they got a sorry face on diversity. And then, we all give them awards. And Zahid is guilty to that. He will never be forgiven if he gives awards to people who do not have a ratio of 40% women, in my view. Workers who, of course, embrace equal opportunities have employees who embrace equal opportunities have greater access, allow greater access to training, and also the issue about gender pay disparity is very critical. And, women don't even know what's happening to them. It happened to me by the multilateral organization that at the level where I was, they did not inform me, but they were paying more to male colleagues at the scale that it is. But, we women don't protest. That's our problem. Because we work so much that we don't raise our voice. So the profits of a globalized economy are more fairly distributed in a society with equality. And my last point here is that equal opportunity practices do help individuals feel they are being treated fairly, equally, and there are legal frameworks across ASEAN economies and the more developed economies where we can learn. And this equal opportunity legal framework and regulations need to be embraced by our parliament and the leadership, and then implemented by both public and private sector. So let me conclude by just one last two sentences that Pakistan to be, of course, more responsible and responsive. So decision making and implementation of gender equality can be swifter. We know it's a long way ahead, and there's a lot of learning from all of you from different segments, but there's learning from outside Pakistan, which is very instrumental. Look at Sheikh Hasina. I mean, she goes out there fighting for women's, she is on she is the leader on the women's this committee, that committee, and I mean she's very aggressive on the United Nations platform. So what does she do? She attracts a lot of grant resources because they all say, "Oh well, she has a commitment at a political level." So while of course we make the wrong statements about women in our corridors, so adopting, of course, more stringent regulatory requirements, and I'm looking singularly at Sadia to fight the case for us for women's representation at the boards and within companies, to bringing them at par with emerging markets, which is at around the range of 20 to 40%. Look at some of the recent evidence that has emerged. So I'm going to stop here because I may have co-opted a little bit of other people's time. So I haven't taken the narrow private sector company view here, because I think that will not work for gender equality. We have to empower, the nation has to empower our girls and all segments of women, education, health, everywhere. So we have a lot of work cut out. And if the public sector doesn't do it, let's just work. And I can tell you, a huge amount of work, my time is devoted to women's cause. And I can tell you, the last message that Christine Lagarde gave to me when she was sitting next to me on my farewell, she said to me that, please go and fight for the cause of women. I did it from IMF platform, which never talked about women. So I stop here. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Saiba. And I'm really grateful that you always, make it convenient for you to be with us on all such important occasions. One of the questions, which I would call the practical questions, in a way that you have shown us the big picture at the global level, and also drawn its relevance to the situation in Pakistan. In 2019, we did a survey in Pakistan by looking at the composition of the boards in terms of gender diversity. So we could figure out Karandaz was having more than, I think, 50 or more than 50% of the board directors were women. So one of the reasons that I can understand it could be your presence, but do you see a real value addition? Because this is critical. On one hand, regulator is asking to have women at the board level. You also acknowledge and admit that the brokers and companies are reluctant. So what is the true value addition? So as the chairperson of the board of the Karandaz, give us some insight. Do you see in terms of the performance, how do you see the state of performance by the women as a board member? Because 50% or more of them are the female in the Karandaz, as per our survey in 2019. So we would like to hear your short insight on that.
So first of all, to be very honest, I think it's a collective effort of the whole board. It's not just Shamshad Akhtar. I mean, Sadia was there, one of the board members, and we worked for a while together until she went to the greener pastures. But, we have been fighting the cause for women at the board. And I have to tell you that some of the most responsible and thoughtful reactions and policy prescriptions come from women board of directors. For one, barring me, most of the women directors are younger and they are running their own businesses. And they are clued up with the modern practices. And when you are involved in it, more intricately in operational way and out there in the market, you understand better what's needed. So practically, a lot of work needs to be done to induct women in the board. It's not easy. So I can tell you the PICG experience. So Sadia probably left me there to make sure I get that legal change. She had already kind of spread the seeds out there, but I don't think I've shared with her how difficult it was. Because some of the men turned around and told me, you are not going to find women. So we said 1/3 women on our board in PICD, no compromise. And I went to the extent of saying, I'm resigning if you don't agree to this. And Sadia knows how easy it was to resign for me at that point. So I have to tell you that a very responsible person who I could not have imagined told me, you will fail. And immediately after that, we succeeded in getting women, although we had women directors, but unfortunately, some of them had completed the term. So now we have two other women besides me. And I am sure if we tried again, we would easily get 50% ratio there. And we will, any exit that happens, we will do that. Now, there's another case, which is a public sector company, no names taken there, where I have submitted a recommendation to replace a woman with women, and it's stuck for almost 6 months. So I have to say, it's not that easy to work in a public sector company for a change, but in private sector, it is easier. But if it's a very powerful company, they have their own interests. So a lot of education is needed to explain what are the benefits. You read the literature on ESG, you read the literature on anything, you will find they say the power of the board is the most instrumental power for getting the ESG and holding the companies accountable for it. Now, how many boards are thinking on it? And if you have women, at least they will be more sincere to the cause. So yes, it is important. It has to be done. And if only we can get SCCP to take it to 40%, and I know it's not in Sadia's hand alone, it requires the whole commission to have consensus and to get out of this garbage that it is costly to do business if it has an impact on doing business. I mean, for God's sake, women don't add to the cost of doing business. Competent women will bring down the cost. I mean, I can tell you, I'm looking at the financial accounts and scrutinizing it more rigorously. So they add a lot of value proposition. I'm all for having more women, but we also need to bring in more women in the companies to bring in the change. I have to tell you, Secretary General got it right, because when there was Secretary General's interviews at the General Assembly, the General Assembly, which is has very powerful G20 countries, basically said, you have to bring gender parity in your senior management. And if you read his statement at the International Women's Day, he's very proud that he achieved gender parity. And, I was minus, and he was able to replace me within few months with a woman. He said, I'm not taking a man. There was a woman here. So you have to be very determined on these things. If, United Nations complicated politics. If he can achieve it, what's the big deal about this limited national politics here in Pakistan?
Excellent. Thank you so much. Zubina, I think you have a question. If you're okay, we can defer it to the next segment because of the time. So Dr. Sabat, thank you so much for, I think, very informative, very useful talk. And now with this, we move to the next speaker, Sadia Khan. I think very proactive on the gender diversity at the governance level. She also has the privilege of being the first female commissioner in the apex regulatory body, Pakistan Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan. Prior to this, she has served as the president and CEO of the Pakistan Institute of Corporate Governance. Very versatile career path in investment banking, development finance, financial regulations. And also in the past 2 decades, she has remained a passionate advocate for corporate governance and served on the various boards as an independent director. Also, she is the author of the book, Corporate Governance Landscape of Pakistan. So Sadia, over to you. Thank you so much, and looking forward to hear your thoughts on the subject. So I'm stopping to share my screen. You can share your presentation, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Syed. Assalamualaikum, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here today. It's always a pleasure to hear Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, and always a very difficult act to follow. Before I get started, in my defense, since the topic is gender equality for sustainable tomorrow, the reason I requested her to be the chairperson was to ensure the sustainability of PICG. So no doubts about that. So today, the topic I've chosen to talk about is a bit more specific to the corporate sector and to a particular sector that I oversee right now. And the reason for doing that was twofold. Number one, I always believe in data-driven decisions. And whenever we get some new data, I like to share it so that people are aware, plus we can form the next level of policy reforms based on that. And in particular, given that the topic I've chosen for today is to focus on the insurance sector, as you know, the current insurance penetration in the country is 0.86%. This is compared to 3 to 4% in India, 12 to 17% in the advanced economies. 20 million out of 220 million lives are currently insured. The largest number of complaints we receive are from the most vulnerable segments of society, widows and others left behind, whose claims are not being settled or who the policies have not been recorded properly. So I wanted to focus on this because I do feel that the more progress we can make, the more we are able to then try and improve not only the gender diversity within the sector, but the ability to respond to the needs of the women within the country. So with that, let me try and share my screen because I put a presentation together. Let's see, I was told it's somewhere right here. So why don't you share yours in the meantime, Zahid, because I've been can't seem to share it with mine.
Okay.
जी शुरू में ले जाइए.
Yeah.
So just I'll start with the next slide. What I've tried to do, the following slide, what I've tried to do is show the continuum, the progress with various initiatives we've taken within the Commission vis-a-vis gender diversity. So starting off with Section 154 of the Companies Act, which was amended in 2017 to specifically require all public interest companies to have female representation on the board. Even though I wasn't with the Commission, we were working behind the scenes to try and implement this. And I think a lot of those in the audience and on the panels also championed this cause for many years. I was on the task force that was tasked with changing the Code of Corporate Governance in 2012. And believe me, when I tried to insert the word gender diversity, even that was resisted at that time. I think we managed to get the word diversity in, but probably gender was taken out. But a few years later, with advocacy and with the championing the cause, we were able to affect that change. Now, when I returned to the Commission in 2020, I wanted to see the impact of that particular regulatory provision. So we put a team together of officials from the PSX and some officials from the Commission to collect the data and see what the impact was of this regulatory change. That report, which was called Women on Boards, was released later that year and is on our website. And I'm going to share a few key messages from that in the subsequent slides. But what was interesting was not only was the the number of women had increased on the boards, but also the positive impact with the inclusion of more women on the performance of the companies was also quite revealing. So I'll just share that for a little while. And ye piche kar lijiye, please. I wish I had control of the data because I think the slides are going back and forth. But I'll just indicate when I want the next slide up. After that, learning the lessons from that particular study, we realized that even though we're getting women onto these decision-making bodies, the corporate pipelines were not robust enough in terms of senior management and middle management to ensure the sustainability of this initiative over a period of time. So the next series of circulars that we released was really to try and ask the boards to come up with gender policies approved by them, overseen by them, and institutionalized by them in terms of the KPIs of senior management to really ensure that all these things that we needed to facilitate women in the corporate sector was done at the board level, and the progress was continuous over time. And that's why Circular 2021 was released this time last year for the NBFC specifically later on, and for the insurance sector following on from that. But for the insurance sector, what we did was we also asked for immediate gender disaggregated data. Now, most of you who do work on this realize that one of the biggest constraints for us has been the lack of this gender disaggregated data. So starting off from the insurance sector, we tried to create that database so that we had the benchmark case, what exists now, so that we could measure the impact of the policy changes over a period of time. And that's the data I want to share with you today. It's pretty dismal, but I think it's important to share it to see what the current situation is and what we can do to further improve it over time. And of course, we have to walk the talk. The last slide I'd like to share would be some of the measures we've taken internally to ensure that there is enough gender diversity within our ranks as well. But apart from this, these changes, which I've tried to portray in terms of the continuum and the progress in our thinking over time, there are other measures as well. And most importantly, that Dr. Shamshad mentioned, the gender bond guidelines that were issued. Now we're waiting for a good uptake on that. That hasn't been forthcoming. And I've been in touch with the relevant department to try and see where we can further improve these guidelines to ensure that the uptake is there from the corporate sector. In terms of new ideas for progress, I'd like to quickly mention two that I'm working on. Of course, as Shamshad mentioned, it's not solely up to me, but hopefully there will be enough momentum to change them when the time comes. Two aspects really that I'm looking at. Number one, those companies who have not yet inducted women directors, one of the excuses they give us, well, we put up their names for election and our shareholders didn't elect them. So what can we do? We're constrained by the processes in the Companies Act about the electoral processes. So one of the ideas is, why don't we then have a 3-tier electoral process, a separate one for independent directors, because the same excuse is sometimes given for them, separate tier for women directors, and one for the rest of the directors, but to be elected, but in these particular categories, so that we ensure that the shareholders also realize that they have to have those particular directors elected onto the boards. The second one is about enhancing it from 1 to 30 to 40%, as Shamshad mentioned. The language I'd like to insert is 1/3 of either gender. So whether it's men or women, we're looking at gender diversity. There are some boards with 100% female representation. Does that have enough diversity in thinking? So the language I like to introduce is 1/3 of either gender. Let's see whether, as and when we release these for public opinion, how far we can go with these particular changes that we have been working on, as I said, behind the scenes, but something that we need to now make a concerted effort to try and improve. So those are just some of the measures, but let's just delve right into some of the justification and the data. So if I could have the next slide up. So the next slide is really talking about the business case for gender diversity. And this is something that all of us have been talking about, and something I personally have been talking and writing about for the past 10 years. And really the business case revolves around 3 aspects. One is diversity with different viewpoints, ideas, market insights, leads to more creative solutions, to more innovations. And this itself enhances not only the contributions of the corporation to the society and the economy, but also enhances the ability of the corporation to cater to the needs of his clientele. Now, here it's important also both in terms of gender diversity throughout the corporate sector, but also in decision-making positions. I mean, 70%, according to some data, 70% of household decisions, purchase decisions are made by women. If they don't have a say in the kind of needs and requirements for women, then what kind of diversity are we bringing in terms of products and services that the companies and the corporations are providing? The second aspect of this business case is increased profitability. There were lots of international studies showing that there is a significant positive correlation between the increased number of female or gender diverse corporations and the financial performance. We tried to do that in our Women on Board study. It was not a detailed regression analysis that we would have done. We were constrained by time and skill sets. But the second time we do it, which is later this year, we will try and make it more robust with greater data at our disposal. But whatever data and slicing and dicing the data we did, all pointed to the same conclusions, that with greater diversity, there was enhanced financial performance. The last aspect, attracting and retaining talented staff. Absolutely, the more women you have, the more role models that you can create, the more mentoring you can do within the corporations for these women, the more they will be attracted to these corporations, and the more you will be able to retain them, because they have others to discuss the issues and challenges with, and the more you staff the committees, whether it's about harassment or about other discrimination, the more you will be able to have women. So success breeds success. The more women you have, the more you will be able to attract and retain them. So as I said, these are the basic cases of gender diversity that we've been talking about, and there's enough empirical evidence to support each and every one of them. Going on to the next slide. These are the next three slides are really going back to the earlier study of 2019. The data is now outdated, but we're going to update it later this year when the results of June 2022 are at our disposal. But very roughly what that particular data shared, and I shared this at this time last year, was the sectors where we had enhanced female presence recorded a better return on equity, return on assets, compared to those where it was static or not or on the decline, where the financial performance was less. Of course, one can argue that there are many other factors surrounding the performance of any one sector. So that's why we went on in greater detail on two particular sectors, textiles and finance, and that's on the next slide. Within these sectors, which were showing good performance with enhanced female representation. The next slide, please. We saw that even within these sectors, for example, textile, those with and without, those who had better results were those with enhanced diversity, and those without did not pose as good financial results. Next slide. Again, slicing and dicing it and trying to show intertemporal comparisons between the 2 years that we compare them with. Again, ROAs and ROEs over time between companies which had women and without women showed the results as greater financial performance being recorded for companies over time with greater female presence. So this is just data from last report, which we hope to update later this year. And the request to Shamshad is that, again, we'll have a combined team of PSX and SCCP take this exercise forward so that we get some more robust results this year. So these are just older results, but let's go on to what we have discovered with the most latest round of data we've collected, and now in particular for the insurance sector, because it's a sector that I oversee, and for reasons that I mentioned earlier, I wanted to get this data earlier so we can start moving forward in that general direction. So with the next slide. Before we go that way, some of the issues and challenges we recorded when we were getting this data. What is it that is holding women back? And of course, this is something that everybody's spoken about, and Shamshad spoke about as well. These hindrances start literally from birth. The education opportunities, guiding them towards non-traditional sectors, all the rest of it. So as somebody said in one of the sessions yesterday, I mean, the kind of things that we're trying to implement at the workplace, वो तो बहुत देर की बात है. I mean, these things, once women have really surpassed these issues and challenges, then only can we try and enhance their recruitment into the formal corporate sector, but only if they are able to get the right education opportunities, get rid of the gender biases, the cultural restrictions, the lack of training and development that they provided, the harassment they face, whether it's at the education institutions or whether when they're applying for opportunities, they commute to work, all the rest. Only then can we facilitate the induction into our respective corporations. So it's a big challenge, but this is something that we really need to work. And I'm hoping, and I haven't seen it in detail, but the gender policy gender framework that has been released yesterday by the planning ministry, I hope this does address some of these issues, and I'm looking forward to studying it in detail to see where we can sort of help in trying to overcome some of these issues and challenges. So going on to the next slide. The next one, please. So as I said, results are not for the faint-hearted. Quite dismal in terms of what we've witnessed right now from the data that we've collected. There are 39 companies in the insurance sector. 10 of them are life insurance, 29 are non-life insurance. Gender disparity exists, overall 1 to 8 in terms of male to female representation. The gap is even wider as we go down to senior and middle management, showing that the corporate pipeline is just not being built up over time. There is a better gap, even though it exists at the board level, and I think that is due to Section 154. And the good news is that recruitment over time is increasing within the sector, and hopefully that will pay dividends down the road. But the sector right now, and especially in the public sector, as Shamshad mentioned, it's something that we really need to work towards. Even the industry leaders, not in terms of performance, but in terms of the premium collected, i.e. in terms of the share of the market, are not displaying any better results. And qualitatively also, it's clear that the measures we're introducing now is now starting to have an impact and will, over a period of time, hopefully show the result that we desire in the sector. So in the next slide, something more granular. This was just the key findings, but in terms of the more granular results. Next slide, please. Yes. So this, as you can see, I mean, I didn't even want to point it in terms of decimal because it's an even decimal pair. But if you see the public sector on the far right-hand side, ratio of male to female in middle management, 1/25. And senior management, 1/14. Better sector overall, but this is really something that we need to strive towards. It is not something that I think either the insurance sector we can be proud of, and it may very well be driving some of the issues that we see within the sector in terms of the ability to also provide the kind of services and products that are catered to the needs of the most vulnerable sectors of society. So going on to the next slide. This is the quantitative analysis, but the qualitative analysis, following on from some of our, as I said, we recently asked them to formulate these policies. They have only 20 out of the 39 that they have approved a policy, six are in the formulation stage. 29 have no daycare facilities, no maternity leaves, another 4, no anti-harassment policies, 14 out of 29, no awareness sessions for anti-harassment, 22 out of 39, a long way to go. Now, when we look at this qualitative data, and these are things about formulating policies, about anti-harassment, about maternity leaves, about daycare centers, there was a question yesterday in one of the sessions I attended that women, of course, have to work twice as hard to prove themselves. And so sometimes you should not ask for concessions or flexi time. And I responded that these are not concessions, please. These are the minimum that companies can offer to create a level playing field given the diversity in the requirements for women. Maternity leave, daycare centers, different biological needs of women. You have to cater to the specific needs, the diverse requirements in order to benefit from the diversity that women bring. So these are not anything over and above. These are the basic requirements. And very importantly, what Shamshad mentioned, equality versus equity. As somebody mentioned, equality is giving everybody a pair of shoes to wear. Equity is giving them shoes that fit them. So these things have to be designed according to the requirements. And these are really the basic requirements that you provide at the workplace to ensure that you attract and retain qualified professional women in your ranks. So as I said, this is something that we all need to work towards. So going to the next slide. Having witnessed, and now I said this is just one sector, but you can imagine if you try and also bring in some of the other sectors, Shimshad mentioned securities brokers. This looks dismal. I think that will probably be not a pleasant picture either. But anyway, what do we do in terms of recommendations for these organizations? Of course, starting off with the gender diversity policy, and we want that because we want the highest level to take ownership of this and ensure all these things that we've witnessed in terms of recruitment, in terms of retention, in terms of promotion, in terms of development, in terms of ensuring that there's no pay gap within the organization. All these have to be documented in the policy and institutionalized by having the most senior members, their KPIs driven by these. Women representation across the entire board, whether it's in terms of hiring committees, whether it's in terms of other committees that are on harassment committees, all the rest, so ensure that there's adequate representation of women across the board. Skill building and development, training, mentoring, very important. I myself mentor university graduates from my alma mater, even to this day, because I see the importance of this mentoring ability. I say this many times in many forums. When I started my career in 1991 on Wall Street, there were very few, not even a handful of senior women, and they had to shed every ounce of femininity to be seen to be as good as the men. They couldn't be seen to be sympathetic to women under their charge. And having witnessed that and experienced that and suffered because of that, I think myself and people from my cohort really saw to ourselves that when we're in a position to implement change, we'll try to improve the lot for women, at least to the extent of the corporations within our domain. Anti-harassment policy is absolutely a minimum, given that the issue endemic to the society. Flexibility, I've already had my say on all these facilities. These are really minimum things in terms of equity. Data, very important. We started collecting it now. We need to enhance it even more from every aspect to try and ensure that our policy making, our recommendations are in line with empirical evidence. Communications, if you're doing it, it's important to communicate that, to create awareness, to ensure that people learn from each other and are able to share the best practices. Monitoring is very important. As I said, the KPIs have to be built up within the institutions. Now, why are we doing all this? As I mentioned, in terms of the business case, yes, it's very important for the sake of equality, for equity, for workforce participation, for enhancement of women in the economic sphere. But at the end of the day, we also want to ensure that in bringing them, they are able to contribute to the work of these organizations by devising the policies, the products, the services that cater to the requirements of the women as well. And that's why we're now going to start focusing on the client side to see what is happening with the way I'm talking about the insurance sector, but this is across the board. How is it that the regulated sectors under our domain are really helping on the client side? And of course, I want to regulate the respective representative to take a lead in that, and hence why for this particular thing, we will be having enhanced communications with the industry representatives. Next slide. So this is really the way forward for the Commission on the workforce side, taking the lessons from this particular set of data. Where do we need to communicate? Who do we need to communicate? What do we need to communicate? And on the client side, what is it that we now need to start doing in terms of data collection and those conversations and the dialogue that need to take place with corporations and industry at large? Finally, I had said that we need to ensure that we're walking the talk, and this is my slide to show what we've been doing at the Commission. And as a very self-interested cutoff, I've chosen March 2020, which was when I started my role at the Commission, this particular time round, and where we are right now. So in terms of enhancement of female representation in management, increased from 19 to 23%. in female heads of departments from 22 to 28%. In terms of job opportunities, comparing the two previous years to the last 2 years, from 25% induction to 45% induction. In particular, the new Hawks, the entry-level position, we recruited 64% women in the last cohort, and we hope to maintain or not, or hopefully increase that. In terms of training opportunities, ICAP and ACCA trainees have increased from 50 to 73%. But as I told the ICAP representatives yesterday, we're doing no favors here, because in terms of the performance and the ability to contribute, I mean, this is a no-brainer. We've been able to benefit from them, and we hope to enhance this over time. In terms of the policies, we've enhanced the maternity leave from 3 to 6 months. I think one of the few organizations that have it in place right now. We've created awareness by training sessions on anti-harassment consistently across all our CROs and headquarters. And of course, in terms of local training and foreign training, we've made sure that we have female representation in all the important international training opportunities and local. And as Shamshad knows, even our board director recommendations on the 2 boards that we nominate, which is the PICG as well as the IFMP, we had both female representations. So that's just in terms of walking the talk. And I'd like to stop there and field any questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think very assertive, walk the talk. Thank you so much, Sadia Khan. We also have a short video to display, but there's a question by one of the participants, Zubina Sadiq, and she's of the view that this requires, I think, a kind of allyship, where we need more men as allies. So, what are your thoughts on how to create more men as allies, because that kind of pull is required at that level? Can we have your thoughts on this question?
Very good question. Zahid, this is the 4th event I'm talking on since yesterday on these issues. And every single event has had a majority of women participants. And I keep saying, why are we preaching to the converted? It's not that women don't know their rights. It's not that women don't rely are in the decision-making positions, most of them are today, and the men allies. So it's very important to have an equal representation of men in all these functions, because we need to make sure that they understand some of the issues, some of the business case we're talking about, and do become champions and allies in this. So absolutely, starting off with our own, the way we project International Women's Day, the way we organize International Women's Day, I think is very important to realize that we need to be talking to men as much as we need to talk to women. There have to be some concrete steps taken in that sense. I think even the banking on equality talks about female champions. They need to have as many male champions to drive home these things. I mean, there's I often joke that the 9-to-5 work day has been designed by men to shirk household duties. They have to realize that when women go home, whether it's 5 or 6 or 7, they're going back to yet another job. I definitely go back to another job of a homemaker and a mother. And I'm sure many of us do. And that is, I think, underappreciated. And we need to try and drive home that point, that one of the reasons we find women are much more productive at the workplace is because they're really putting in that 9-to-5 productively, because they know they can't afford to delay the second job they need to go to. And amongst the many other multitasking abilities, whether it's looking after elderly parents, whether it's looking after young kids, whether it's just completing the household chores that need to be conducted for the house to continue. And there, I think it's equally important for the men to realize that if we are to progress, then not only need to step up at the work front level, but they need to step up at the household level as well. And I think I often get flagged for saying this, but I think that's extremely important, that the partnership between men and women has to be equal, not only in the workplace, but in the home front as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm working with the ISO Geneva on the HR standards development, and ISO is very proactive in developing global standards in line with the SDGs. So they asked us to share some of the success stories In that context, I requested Sadia Khan, and she was kind enough to share the on SEC own state of affairs, how they've been, she has been able to contribute toward the improvement, which we converted into a short video, which I would like to happy to share with everyone. So let's see the video. I hope streaming goes well. So before we conclude the first round, which was definitely very engaging and a very powerful talk, and not just talk, but walk the talk. And let's have a visible, louder applause for both the powerful ladies, I think, who are in a very, I would say, strongest position to advance the mission of gender diversity. Would you like to join me for clapping for both of them? And before we move to the next segment. Okay, thank you once again, Sadia Khan and Dr. Shamshad. Very pleasant experience, and we look forward to have your patronage and your support for the future as well. So with this, I hand over the conversation to Sajid Aslam, who is the moderator. And Sajid, over to you. I'm also giving you the presenter rights, so please stay at the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Zaid. What a wonderful session. What a wonderful conversation. And I think it's backed by a very, very strong data and the examples coming from all over the world. I think marvelous, I would say. And now I think it's bring us to the second one where we are trying to build a dialogue. And we have got, again, I think like Sadia, like Dr. Shamshad, these all are the role model, not for the women only. These are the role model for the society, for men as well. And now the panel which we are going to talk about, and the one which will be engaged in this dialogue, I think we will be seeing another list of the role models where the young women and men equally, they look up to them and would like to hear more and more from them in terms of their personal stories and the successes, the way they have created for themselves and the people around them. So we are joined by Musharaf Hai, former CEO of Unilever and L'Oreal. We have got Jahan Ara, founder and CEO of Catalyst Labs. We have got Muniza Butt, partner KPMG. We got Fatma Asad Said, CEO of Bacchus Consulting, and Maliha Mimi Bangesh, who is IFC and expert in the digital finance as well as green banking. So welcome to this session, and I'll open that session by inviting everybody, and we will start with Musharaf. That tell us your personal story. Let's take 2 minutes and really try to understand who the Musharaf Hai is and how she has created such a marvelous success, the first female CEO of Unilever in Pakistan. How you get there? You are on mute, Musharaf. Musharaf, you are on mute right now. Kindly unmute yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Sajid. And first and foremost, it was absolutely delightful to hear Sadia and Shamshad. I think data-driven, as everybody has said. And, everything they said, I was thinking, oh my God, this is what we've been trying to do. But a lot still has to be done. But at least the mindset is so positive. And when we have role models like Sadia and Shamshad, we have hope because the direction is there. Who could disagree with any of those points? So that's how I would like to begin my personal story, because I started my corporate career in 1983, which was, moons away. And before that, I did 3 years of teaching. So today I sit with about 40 years of work experience, 4 decades, out of which 20 years I have done CEO jobs. Why do I say that? My first CEO job started in 2001 with Unilever. I've seen so much pain. I have seen so much happiness. I have seen tears. I have seen laughter. So there's a lot that has gone. It's not all about, just having got there. It's about how the journey unfolded. And the journey unfolded with bumps, and the journey unfolded with in a zigzag manner as well. But what kept me going through all these phases was, one, a very strong self-belief, courage of conviction, I call that. And not just keeping it to myself, but very, very clearly being vocal, being open, not worrying too much about what everybody thinks around me. Yes, you have to be sensitive to the society in which you live. You have to be sensitive to your audience, but you have to speak your mind, and you have to have that courage of conviction. Second, it is integrity of your own thought process. And it's not necessary you're always right. I've made mistakes, I've called bad decisions. No way, no problem. I could sleep well, but I would get up the next morning and then still continue. And why? Because there was that integrity, that what I did was what I thought was right at that time. And again, failure is part of success. Failure is not about just giving up. So I come to my third point, and that has got to do with tenacity to sustain. You've got to, at some point, sort of park your own sensitivity. You've got to think that the dream is bigger than what happened. Not be just a flash, a bubble. It has to continue. And we never reached a finish line. I have never reached any finish lines. And till today, I feel I'm in that journey. So these are the values, personal values, which take us to where we have to go. And all of us have to make a difference in our own way. So instead of waiting for the world to do things, we've got to just make that difference ourselves. And every little bit matters. It creates the bigger ripple. So I think today, while I'm out of my corporate career circle, but I'm still here and with everybody. Why? Because I am really delighted. And in fact, it gives me a lot of happiness that we have now about 75 women in this program that Zahid has created. And if I can mentor, if I can coach, if I can project, this is the legacy I want to leave. So my pledge is to leave a legacy where I have put women, not just mainstreaming, but into the center of influence and decision-making. That is my passion now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chef. And I can witness that. There are a lot of people you have developed in the Unilever, in your Standard Chartered career, as well as L'Oreal career.
Not Standard Chartered, correction.
Okay.
That didn't last more than 6 to 9. That was Citibank.
So there are people who are inspired because of your presence and the way you have developed your career and the way you have disrupted that myth. And we will come to more detailed question. But this disruption brings me to our next role model, Jahara, which against all the myths and the limitations we were seeing in the IT sector, in developing even the startup ecosystem, the incubation side of it, I think you were the one of an icon who's always been there and disrupting that and leading that and also inspiring a lot of people to follow your footsteps. So let's listen from you in 2 minutes that how you really managed to do that in such a tough environment, particularly when we talk about Pakistan.
Thank you very much, Sajid. After such powerful dispensations from Dr. Shamshad and Sadia and Musharaf Hai, who's an inspiration as well for many entrepreneurs. I just want to share that whatever I have done in life, especially in my professional life, has been out of a need that I have seen that I thought needed changing. And I have tried to use the abilities that I possess to impact that change. I have never done anything in my professional life that I did not enjoy, that I did not think was going to create impact. And so when I joined the IT sector, especially Pasha as president of the association, I saw a need. There was innovation happening all across the country and nobody knew about it, not locally, not internationally. So I made it my mission to make sure that I would talk about it. I would spread the word that Pakistan was a place which had a lot of innovation, which had a tech sector, and which then eventually 10 years ago, when I took on the mantle of spreading the word regarding the startup ecosystem, as well as helping develop it, it was something I strongly believed in. I saw young people with talent everywhere around me. All they needed was a guidance from us, was mentorship, was connections that they did not possess, just so that they could flourish. And it has happened. It's so great to see the change, so great to see that what you envisioned actually took place. And so I don't credit myself with that. I credit the environment around us, the talent that exists around us. All we need to do sometimes is to just do something very small to ensure that you ignite the process and let things happen. So, you know, you can say I'm responsible, but I think it's really each person who's part of the startup ecosystem and the tech sector who is responsible for the success that we see around us today.
No, very well said, but we can't take your leadership credit for you for that leadership to really influence that ecosystem. I've been following that for a while now. And now we got another one, Muniza Usman, but again, the first female partner in the audit services and particularly for KPMG, such a large organization. So Muniza, that's one of the field which is always considered as a boys' club. That's the term normally they use for banking as well, and for audit and account and finance. And I can see Mimi also smiling. We will come to that finance side later. So let's hear from you. How did you manage to really create that success for yourself?
Yes, Ajit, thank you. You know, it's a pleasure to be, over here talking. And Dr. Shamshad and Sadia have always been such inspiring speakers. I heard Sadia's plan yesterday also, and it's very heartening to see all that is going on at SCCP and all the steps that they're taking. As for my story, I think I would credit where I have reached to the rebellion that I had in me always. So I came from a family of doctors, and it was, an unsaid rule in our house that I'm also going to take up medicine. But since the beginning, I think I had this streak in me, which wanted to rebel against the norm. So then I opted for a profession which was unheard of in my family, because we don't have any chartered accountants in our family. And I always like taking these challenging tasks on myself. So when I joined KPMG also back in 1996, I think I was the second female in the office. So, and you can imagine the challenges, like, not having a separate washroom for females at like our office, to like even at clients, and sticking out like a sore thumb, in like male dominated teams, as well as in boardrooms, I would say. So I think I've come a long way from that time. But I think one of the things that was pointed out earlier also, resilience is very important. As I think Musharaf pointed it out, women need to exhibit resilience, and also I think be thick-skinned, because, when I was also in a managerial position, I remember all my male colleagues, like, because I had set a timing for myself that, being a working mother, I thought that from 6 to 8, I needed to be home, because that was the time I needed to like put my, kids to bed and have them in order. And if there was late sitting, I would come later then to office and complete the tasks on hand. So I remember my male colleagues used to always have a bone of contention, I would say, regarding this. And I just knew my purpose. I had sincerity of purpose in me, and I knew where I had to be, what I had to do. So, you just need to sometimes turn a deaf ear to what people are, saying and pulling you down. But at the same time, I believe that, if you have the resilience and if you have, the courage, I would say, then the world is yours. Nothing can stop you. And one of the things I think which Musharaf also pointed out earlier, self-belief is very important. When I was offered partnership some 14 years before, since I did not have any female, occupying that position, so I did not believe in my abilities as much as I should. And I'm thankful to the Almighty that, my leaders at that time, my bosses, they believed more in my abilities, because when they offered me a partnership, I remember telling them that I don't think I'm fit for the role. Imagine somebody saying that. I would not ever conceive my male counterparts saying that to their bosses. But I'm being so naive and not having any role models in front of me. I remember saying that to my boss. But thankfully, my bosses were very nurturing, and they reassured me of my abilities to be where I am today. So I think, resilience, being having a lot of courage, these are the ingredients that you need to like imbibe, to have a successful career in the male dominated field.
No, thank you, Vanessa. And I know by my own experience that you are the one of a role model for a lot of young professionals who see that there is no more that glass ceiling, and the people can really become partner in that. And that's bring us to another role model, Fatma, who is right now CEO of Abacus Consulting, but that's not all. She's sitting in a lot of different boards, and she's also very much engaged in the other activities which help people to develop, and also the policy sides of it, where she regularly provide the contribution and the guidance on the different forum, and a very well-respected speaker, I would say, in today's world. So Fatma, let's hear from you. You are coming from the business family, and how you managed to create that success particularly.
Thank you very much, and Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Really appreciate this opportunity, Zahid and Sajid, and of course, stellar lineup of inspirational women, which I have the good fortune to have in my life. And I've learned even in this session quite considerably. And I think that's what, excuse me, has been the fundamental philosophy which has driven my 24-year professional career, is to continuously learn and not only seek knowledge, but apply that knowledge. And that's something that I learned very early on. I come from a family which is predominantly chartered accountants. Again, what you were mentioning, Muniza, from a medical point of view, I come from a family. My father, my siblings, they're mostly on the finance side, and chartered accountants as well. But what triggered this interest, my own technical focus throughout my career, was HR and change management and governance, was the experience that I had at the United Nations in Geneva. This was during my MBA program, and I did an internship over there, had the good fortune to be over there. And then I did an internship in Citibank in Pakistan. And then during my MBA program, what I discovered was, even though my focus was finance all the way up to the last semester at LUMS, I realized that it was people. At the end of the day, no matter what structures, policies, etc., governance models you have, it was that CEO who made that decision. It was the sales manager out on the road or talking to a client, which fundamentally broke or made an organization. And I found that extremely inspirational and very critical to how you drive an organization. And I changed my track. Again, that sense of let's give something else a shot. And now I'm talking about in the late 90s, where HR was not as developed as, at least in Pakistan. So it was not thought of as a career, so to speak. But fast forward to 24 years now, in 2022, I'm not only leading Abacus Consulting, but which is predominantly technology and outsourcing and consulting business, but also sit on 5 other boards as an independent director. 3 of them are non-for-profit. And it's been an incredible experience. Of course, not easy. And the challenges that I fought with, or I could say dealt with, was my own self. You know, the self-doubt. A lot of young professionals say we self-doubt ourselves. You know, you walk into a room. What I learned the hard way was that I deserved to be in that room and I deserved that seat, but I doubted myself. And it was a hard lesson that I learned through my career as well. Secondly, to be prepared. When you walk into a meeting, when you walk into a presentation, make sure that we are prepared and adding value as we go along. It's a very common sense statement to make, but a lot of us experience that because we walk in perhaps as women as well, self-doubting ourselves, really, you know, sort of not very confident. And then that kind of derails the reason why we're there as well. And that has really helped me, you know, that self-awareness of who I am, what I stand for, what my value system is, and therefore the value that I can contribute to those who are around and where, you know, where I am asked to be a part of. Another aspect is relationships. Earlier on as well, Sadia touched upon it, Dr. Shamsad also mentioned it, and of course, Muniza and Musharaf and Jahana. I mean, it's about relationships. It's about building sustainable relationships. At the end of the day, it's sometimes we forget what someone said, but what we don't forget is how they made us feel. Did they inspire us, or did they take away our dignity? And that is an important, valuable lesson, and it works in the corporate sector as well. It works in the work environment as well. That's what we walk away with. And secondly, make sure that one is applying the knowledge that you are learning. In the field that I am right now, it's been now 1 year as CEO of Abacus. It's been a roller coaster ride. There was a crisis that we faced as an organization at the governance level. Actually, it was March 9th, exactly 1 year today, I became the CEO, actually March 8th, that was yesterday. So it's 1 year in this particular role. And in that crisis, we had to consolidate, restructure, put certain policies on board, but take everyone along, the men and the women, and create a culture. I always believe culture eats strategy for breakfast. Create that culture of go forward, don't look back, keep the momentum going. So that's a quick synopsis of my journey so far.
Thank you, Fatma. We will be hearing more and more from everybody. We're just opening up, and that's bringing me to Malia Bangesh. And I think, again, in the area, particularly finance, banking, investment, which is historically considered as a male-dominated profession or a boys' club. So you have done very well from IFC and going up to becoming an expert on the sustainability and the green banking and the green finance and the digital financial services. So I think share your story as well, and let's do it in 2 minutes, and then we open up the session with the question answer. Meanwhile, for the audience, please keep typing your questions, and we will be picking up on your questions from the chat later. So Malia, over to you.
So thank you so much, Sajid. for this opportunity and for your question. And first of all, let me just say this to the audience, that for who you're seeing over here, is my story begins. It's a very different story, and yet very similar to the wonderful stories we've just heard. I'm someone who hails from a very small town. I was born in Kohat, which is a small town in what we call Pakhtunkhwa today. And I was born to a services family, government services and armed forces family, so nobody from the business side. And I was also someone who was by nature a very shy, tongue-tied and very sensitive person. And so even though I was highly academic and a bit of a bookworm, I was actually always in the shadows. So for me to be here, sitting in front of you and speaking is nothing short of a miracle. And certainly maybe if I had ever had a dream, I would have dreamt something like this. So I'm really grateful, and I have a lot of gratitude to the Almighty that today I'm sitting and speaking to all of you. But my story has a lot of lessons, and I want to share those lessons. They're lessons of struggle. So basically, I came from a very traditional family, as you can imagine, in the frontier. It's like that. We observe parda, and we are very conservative. And so even though education was common, women had not stepped out of the house for work. And so those of you who are sitting out there and facing certain familial pressures, I want to tell you that if you put your heart and mind into something, and if you can prove yourself and your worth, I think a lot of what I said, an invisible hand will always help you. I know I'm short, there's paucity of time, but there are a few learnings that I want to tell you about. I basically ventured into the business world, which again was something that was not done before. I took my MBA because I was academically very strong. So that was my advantage. But believe me, even when I went to my college, because I had never been in a co-ed college, it was so difficult for me to even communicate with my male colleagues, leave alone put my point across in front of a room of people who are very smart. And so it was a culture shock I had to deal with as well. Nevertheless, I joined the corporate sector of the corporate banking of one of the largest banks. That was my first job. And I found that I was very successful in what I did, primarily because of 2 or 3 things. And I will share those with you. I was always perhaps a little bit naive, but my relationships were always those of trust, and people could trust me. I was very, very hardworking. I would never compromise on ethics. So many women before me have talked about doing the right thing. So yes, I'd always end up doing the right things, even though if at the time it didn't seem like, the very smart thing to do, or it didn't benefit me, but I did do that. So these were 2 or 3 principles that really helped me. But as I said, because I was, of a certain nature and all, there was always self-doubt. I was always underconfident, and also others could not have that kind of confidence in me. So it wasn't one-sided. They say, oh, she's too soft, she's too this, she's too that. So for those of you who feel that you don't have that perfect, sort of aggressive or assertive personality, it doesn't matter. If you're doing something with passion and you're doing it well, in the end, you will find success. And even the naysayers, Nisa talked about being deaf. I'm very deaf. I've always been deaf because I've always heard this. And I'd said, oh, but this is my passion. This is my dream. I want to pursue it. And also because many of us have self-doubt, and we do feel very, very at times drained or overwhelmed. I think, again, what everybody has said, that was my core strength, faith in the Almighty, and of course, resilience. So I would be crushed, I would be broken, I would be crying, I would say, I can't do another day of this. But the next morning, I would lift myself up and I'd say, come on, Mimi, you've got to do this. So this is basically the thread that I want to talk about. And so today I am serving on 7 listed boards and about 2 or 3 and non-listed boards, including a microfinance board. And I never thought I would be doing that. Just about a year and a half ago, there was nothing on the horizon for me. Similarly, I've been deputy CEO of Al Habib Asset Management. I've been, in an MD of a World Bank project, the Investment Climate Reform Unit, which brought the entire investment promotion and ease of doing business. We launched that here in Pakistan, and I was the one who set it up. I was a director, and I've set up a digital bank and gotten it off the ground. I'm a technical expert at IFC. Did I ever think I would do this? Perhaps not, but I did dream that, something nice would happen. And so I just want all of you to keep dreaming, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great advice. Keep dreaming and making sure that you wake up every morning and do something even once the times are tough. I think let's go a little bit deeper. Thank you, Valia, for sharing that. And I'm sure I can see a lot of questions there coming up. And we will come to those recommendations and advice at the later stage. So, Chef, let's go a little bit deeper here, and let's try to understand that social and cultural biases that block women from achieving that success, that sustainability. So let's go a little bit deeper and share your views around it. What are those social and cultural biases which are basically creating a challenge today?
Okay. So I'm going to just slightly modify what you have asked to saying, I think there are social cultural biases which go very deep and they are time consuming. They are not easy fixes. So we've got to walk on, as I say, 5 feet or 4 feet. Those social cultural biases start from the home, from your own value system, from the time you're born to the time you are raised and you grow up. So a lot has to go into transforming the mindset and the thinking culturally and otherwise. And also the value set that we are born with. Like today, I'll give you the example just today on in our group, we got this message, and then I'm forgetting, and she said, this is my son who has written that I was influenced by my wife, my daughter, and I learned from them. That's the best example I can give you of how the social and cultural values have to change. So there is a ripple effect you create when men start thinking like this. We have a long way to go. So if we unpeel the onion, as I say, from metro cities to the newer cities and to the deeper areas of Pakistan, it will be generations that will make the change. But somewhere it has to start. So the first start has to do with the parents, with education, with the values that we are brought up with. Now, do we have the patience to wait for generations and generations for society to change? Maybe not. So while we do that, we also have to make a change in our own sphere of influence. So whatever, like we are today, I think here about 37, 40 people or 40 plus listening. In our own sphere, we've got to start making the changes, where we have to, by example, trust women with merit, of course. By example, put them in decision-making positions. By example, make sure they're not on the sidelines. By example, make sure we are listening and giving them that space to make mistakes, to take risks, and to shine. So I think we have to, on one hand, be cognizant of the fact that the social cultural value sets have to progress, let's put it like that. And it has to start really fundamentally from school, from college, from home. And then on the other hand, we've got to have in our own sphere what we do. Last point. I was listening to Shamshad, Akhtar, and to Sadia. You see, policy makers will definitely need to bring in policies so that they institutionalize this change. But we can't just wait for policies. But policies at the same time are very crucial in order to institutionalize. I'll give the example of the corporate companies that we all are working in, all of us. Until and unless you have a policy for maternity, you have a policy for sexual harassment, the first line should be zero tolerance there for sexual harassment. Maternity policy, childcare, sales managers, if they are women, should be given driver's allowance. So policies institutionalize behaviors. Policies give you that comfort that, this is not something which is being given because I'm a woman. It is I earn it. Like somebody said earlier, and I think it was Shamshad Akhtar who said, it shouldn't be seen as a woman thing. It is because we merit it. So that's what I would like to say. These are the various dimensions of that question, I think. Some will have to be tackled over time, will take long, but some we have to do fast. So move the levers, but don't wait for everything to happen. And let's not look at somebody else who's going to make this difference. We have to make the difference.
Thank you. And I think the best thing which you picked up, starting from ourselves and starting from our home, I think that's the best way to go. I think let's bring another thing. There are a lot of myths around the professional woman. So Maniza, I would like to engage you very quickly. What are the top 3-4 myths you hear about the professional woman who's going out and working there? And we will come to the solution later, but let's first bring it out that what are the myths in general?
Oh, yes, Sajid, there are so many myths surrounding professional women. And I think when a professional woman is married and has kids, so the most common one is that she would not be able to justify her role, either as a professional leader or as a mother or a homemaker. So that is one that tops the list because they feel that she compensates one role for the other. Then I think the others that follow through are that she will not have the confidence to lead, especially because if the organization has people who are older to her, the gray-haired men, and if it's a young professional woman taking charge, so they feel that she would not have the confidence to deal with.
I think I had lost the connectivity.
No, you are
Musharaf, are you there with us now?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we're just talking about the myths. Just ask me about the myths that surround professional women. So, I think another one is that people feel that professional women don't support other professional women to grow. I think that is that myth really needs to be busted because it really is not constricted to women only. It can happen anywhere. I don't know why they just tag it to women. Another one I think that is that women are bad at numbers. I have a strong reservation for that. And leading from that, I think they feel that because they are bad at numbers, they will not make good businesswomen or they will not be good entrepreneurs. That is a common myth, I think, which I also feel and I face, in the industry. Lastly, I would say one of the myths is that, there is a feeling that women have to be perfect at anything that they do. I don't know why the need comes like that. Are men perfect in everything that they do? So this is also one of the myths that they want a woman to be a superwoman, a superhero kind of a role that she has to adopt. So I think this is a myth also that needs to be busted. So these are the myths that I listed. We can always discuss about how we can bust them together.
No, definitely. I think let's come to the second part, and I'll invite Jahara there. I think when we look at the different professional qualities and the progression of the woman within the professional career, whether it's a business or a job, what are the key vital qualities you will be looking at, and what we should be expecting, and what stops them to really develop and reflect that? So, Jahara, starting from you, what are the vital qualities a professional woman should be reflecting in their everyday life?
So I think some of the vital characteristics that a woman needs to have is grit, determination, be go-getters, despite what anybody might say. Negotiation skills, I think, is one of the most important things for a woman to have, whether in terms of salary negotiation, giving pushback when it's needed, how to maintain good working relationships with male colleagues, how to bring in new practices in the organization without facing too much resistance, because sometimes it's in the tone that you use, in the approach that you have, in the way that you bring more male and women champions into the fold so that whatever you're suggesting has a buy-in. Leadership qualities, how to manage workflows and not micromanage, how to show empathy, which I think many women do show, and how to manage or face confrontation. I think this is one of the most important things, because it's important not to take it personally. When you face confrontation, when you feel somebody is being unfair, I think women need to be able to handle it without sort of taking it personally, without, thinking, is it something that I have done that has caused this to happen? And I think the reason that women sort of sometimes find it difficult, although in all the women that you see on this panel today and many more that I know, they have learned to master all these areas. The important thing is that we need to teach younger women to do the same. In all the sessions that I have attended since yesterday and spoken at, many of the young women have asked these questions. How do we handle this? If somebody's being unfair, how do we go about convincing them that, we deserve this? But the imposter syndrome, I still feel, is the strongest thing that holds women back. Can I do it? Am I capable of it? Yes, you are. That confidence in yourself, the skills that you have built so that you are able to deliver, those are things that are very important, and don't question your ability to do it. That's what I think holds women back more than anything else, that imposter syndrome. And I think Fatma has spoken about it. She's spoken about it to our fellows at the Women Leadership Program that we run. And this is something that many of them have voiced, that, we feel before anybody questions us, we question ourselves. And that is, that's something that holds us back. So no, don't be unfair in thinking that I am a superwoman and I can do everything. But the things that you do know and you do well, acknowledge it and make sure that others acknowledge it as well.
Thank you, Jara. And I'll building upon that question, and I'll pick it up with Fatma there. What men need to change, how we as men can create a better world or a work environment, what we are doing wrong, intentionally or unintentionally, we might not be even trained for that. So what are those sensitivity which we as men, we should be more aware of, and how we can, or our female colleagues can help us to understand as well. Like Jahara said, the self-doubt. Sometimes you might find a colleague who is unable to understand that they are doing something which is irritating. So Fatma, quickly from your side first.
Thank you very much. I think that's a great question. And from a personal perspective, I've had a great experience in terms of the support that I've received, starting from my own father, then my husband. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't without bumps. That doesn't mean there weren't difficult conversations along the way as well, to understand that how I evolved as a professional as well. So the idea is to be aware of the other person's maybe not just biases, but what their perspective is as a human being. I feel that's the starting point. One of the things that has allowed me to grow and where I am right now is to see myself as a professional first. And that enabled the men that I partnered with, worked, whether they were clients, whether they were colleagues, to say, we deserve to be here because we're professionals. We have certain qualifications, competencies, we bring this value to the table. And when the conversation starts from that point, it's just more productive and it's healthier. And, you sort of, we don't park it, but it's a much more open-ended discussion that takes place, I feel. I've had the good fortune to have great supporters from many men counterparts and colleagues as well to help me along the journey as well. However, I felt that the reason why it was that was because I was prepared. I learned that, as I mentioned earlier on as well, I prepared for I was very, I did come from a place of self-doubting, being very quiet, etc. But my career and the support that I got, one of the things that is very important to realize is, a sort of a consciousness of the family values, because that's very important. Maybe at the home, there is more segregation, there is more discrimination perhaps, maybe there is a different way of dealing with the women, whether it is the mother or the daughter or the wife. And then you come into a workplace, and a workplace which requires both the men and women to partner and collaborate to add value. And that shift is the responsibility of the organization, one, to be cognizant of, and for the leaders in whatever capacity at all levels to be, have those deeper conversations with them, have those awareness sessions. So I feel that, and I would like to point out one thing, Sajid, it's not only the men sometimes, it's sometimes the women who come from that place of being negative. I'm sorry to say this, from on all due respect, even Mercer surveys global that are run, they say sometimes women are women's greatest enemies. And unfortunately, we don't support each other as much as we should. And this has happened time and time again, whether socially or in the workplace. So we tend to not network as much. And when we don't network, because maybe we're a mother or we're taking care of elderly parents at home, etc., we tend to disconnect after the work hours, and we don't, go out to social engagements. This does have a bearing. So, that engagement, Sajid, is extremely important for the men to recognize that sometimes they may not be able to be involved in certain activities, which they maybe call the boys' club. And there's a different dynamic that is there. So very quickly wrapping up, I'm sorry I've taken more time. I feel one, to consider each other as partners. Two, to be aware that we are diverse. The concept of inclusion is differentiation and segmentation of policies and structures and frameworks that exist within an organization. Be very conscious of it and create that awareness and keep the communication open. But women also need to support each other much more as well as we grow.
No, thank you, Fatma. I think inclusion and respect for that diversity, open conversation, I think that, and then not looking from a gender lens, but looking from a human lens and treating them as a partner there. I think these are the great things, even for men, to really make sure they recognize those, and whenever they pick up a conversation, they can have those biases away and they can have an unbiased conversation there. Musharaf, I'll come to you, and then I'll have one common question for our panelists. It's around the digital access and the financial inclusion. So, Musharaf, the question for you is, how do we transform that ecosystem? You picked up on a certain things earlier from a home side, and how we really build it and start from our circle of influence. But if we are looking at the ecosystem, you said we might not have a patience for a society to see that difference. I think the bigger issue is that the Generation Z, which is coming up, they don't have a patience for us to make those changes. They are coming very, very strong, and they are going to disrupt, or either they will run away if they don't find the equity. I wouldn't say equality, but the equity or the fairness in the way they are being treated. So how we really drive that ecosystem, where to start that?
I think that you've answered it partly in what you've said, Sajid, because I think the generation that is coming up does not have the patience. Thank God for that. So they are wanting everything today. That is what our insights tell us. They are not going to wait for gratification down the road. So they are going to be the catalysts. And the way they will go is through the virtual world, because the speed at which
it seems we lost Musharaf Hai.
I think
Okay,
she's
so
disconnected.
Yeah, she's disconnected there. So Muniza, if you want to pick up that question, and then we will come to the financial inclusion and digital access as a one, like Musharaf also mentioned as a one. Musharaf, I think your connection is not stable. We are barely able to hear you. Muniza, if you can unmute, you are.
Sorry.
Yeah,
she's here.
I'm having some internet connectivity problems. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, sorry about that. But just let me bring this to the point. So you see that the more digitized we become, it is not just to drive the economy, it is to empower women. And earlier studies have also shown that digitization is the equalizer. So it will build the equity, it will enable women to get into the financial inclusivity also. To me, they go hand in glove. Because you see, when a woman is working and she has her income, she has a different kind of courage. She has a different kind of conviction. She has power behind her. So therefore, to me, the digital transformation and financial inclusion has to go hand in glove, and they're both very important. So while we will try to make the difference in our cultural, social value set, where women are given the same pedestal or the same kind of importance as men from the time they are born, I think it is the digital. My faith is in the digital and the financial inclusion. You can't have one without the other. And I'm a strong believer that sustainability for women lies not just in values, but in financial independence, whichever way you want to put it. I don't know, inclusion, independence, whatever.
Economics always become very, very powerful driver in terms of the disruption. So
yeah.
economics.
And just one more thing. Exactly. Economics is the driver, and digital is what will reduce the time band for this change. What you were talking about, how long should we wait? The impatient, it's digital. The speed at which digital, the speed. Okay, sorry if I have taken.
Thank you for that. So Jahara, let's come to you. You are working with a lot of startup and the technology side, and there's a lot of talk about the inclusion and everything. Still, we have got 19% women who have access to the broadband. And we are talking about the 4Gs and 3Gs and the broadband everywhere. So while we are looking at the digital access and the financial inclusion, I think that's one challenge. So what is the opportunity which can drive the adoption and let the people have more and more broadband to become more inclusive in terms of the digital access and financially otherwise?
So I think, Sajid, that this is where the government role comes in, the role of policymakers comes in. Digitization is extremely important for a country like Pakistan because it can break down so many barriers to our growth, to our development, and it can open up opportunities not just for women, but also for all the young people who live in Pakistan. And so the way to do that is to make sure these opportunities are equally available, not only in Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, but across the country, in towns, in villages, in the smaller cities. Unless we do that, we are not providing equal opportunity, either for women or for young people across the country. And then that will then reduce the opportunities that are available to people across the country. So I think what policymakers need to look at is make sure that broadband is available. We don't have a problem. I don't know why more spectrum is not being released. It can be released. We have the space to do it. Make sure it's affordable. And also then we have to tackle important policy challenges like privacy, security, consumer policy, competition, innovation, skills development, because unless skills are developed, people will not be able to use the technology for their betterment. Failure to adequately address these issues could lead to economic inefficiencies, reactionary policies, a worsening of the inequalities that already exist, and a further erosion of the social fabric. I think that's why it's very important for those of us who are fortunate enough to play a role in impacting that policy, for us to do that for the well-being of all the people who live in Pakistan. And if we do that, then there's nothing holding us back. This country has so much potential, and the internet has enabled us to really break down those barriers and get beyond what many countries took years to develop. We can do now, but we need to make sure that all these changes take place, that the opportunities are there, that collaboration happens, that people connect, And there's a wide range of policy areas which are critical to making that happen. So I hope that we can collectively do that. We have a collective voice, and this voice needs to be used for all of Pakistan, not just for ourselves personally.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody, any panelists want to add something around it?
Yes,
Yeah.
Sajid, if I may. So I think that excellent points raised by Jahanara, and having her experience, I think that she really has a hand on the pulse of the digital market, and those insights are critical. Now, just to give the audience an understanding of the financial inclusion gap, the IFC has now estimated that there's a $1.7 trillion financing gap for women and women-owned businesses, small and medium businesses in the emerging economies only, which includes Pakistan. So this is how huge the gap is. And also, just to give you an idea, if we talk about financial inclusion, we are actually really quite low at that end, because in Pakistan, according to World Bank, about 100 million of the 220 million of population is totally unbanked. So we're not talking about underserved, we're talking about totally unbanked. Within that, if we dive a little bit deeper, we see that the access to finance or financial inclusion for women is still at 7%. Like for the banked people, we're not talking about the unbanked. So it's only still 7% where women, adult women, we're talking about. So we're talking about individuals as well as the SMEs or the businesses, women-led businesses. There is a huge financial inclusion gap. So why is it important? Now let's look at why these figures are a bit alarming and why they need to be changed. It's because financial inclusion actually empirically has been proven that financial inclusion actually provides you A, like Musharaf said, sustainability. B, it actually has economic impact, positive economic impact. And there's studies to show this internationally, especially in emerging economies. So women who have access to finance, or they have savings, or they have access to loans, whether they are, running their homes, so whether they're running businesses, whether they're doing some small, chores and being rewarded for it, whatever their role is, where once they get that, their productivity increases. Their actual, of course, the profits of what they're doing, when the productivity increases, the profits increase. And so including that, then they are able to invest more. And when they invest and save, we see that women actually like to put these investments into and savings into assets. And so they become owners, like landowners or asset owners, which are productive assets. So imagine the impact on the economy. Not only are they themselves doing better, but actually they are putting back into economic assets. So even in the rural segment, if we look at it, in the rural segment, women will put these kinds of access to finance. I work on the board of a microfinance institution. So 80% of the people that take the loan are women, and they're in interior Sindh. And so they put the money in either livestock or in doing some of the handicrafts that they do, or they actually go out and work in the fields and they produce things which are then sold. So what I'm talking about is the economic impact of financial inclusion is tremendous. I'm just going to give an example of Turkey, where women were given, women-owned SMEs were given some capital through a funding regime by their government. And for every $1 that was given, there was a multiplier effect of $4 to $5 on the economy. So they actually did. So I think two very important thing that I really want to highlight over here is that financial inclusion and digital inclusion, even though they go hand in hand, I think that there's not enough that has been done. So just having, digital access, I think, is not enough, because there has to be a very holistic and 360-degree approach to creating, converting this digital access to financial access. And that is by creating financial literacy. Women generally don't have. I'm not talking about rural women. I'm talking about some of our mothers, our sisters, our colleagues, mothers.
Malia, thank you very much. I think we got your point. So digital access will not work alone unless until there is a financial inclusion and the people, and particularly women, are given the access to the credit and the business side. I think,
I just wanted to very quickly add to what Jahanara and Mimi were saying. They're very pertinent points. But of course, the reality is, and that is what has been reinforced, is that the technology revolution, the digital revolution is here to stay. We already have environments which are adopting the metaverse. That's happening. So what does it really mean, where we have financial inclusion on one hand, and then you have the need for the skill development that has to take place on a fast track basis? And the conversation is not just for the technology sector. Let me please reinforce that. This is facing all organizations. Unless organizations innovate, transform towards a digital roadmap, they will not stay relevant or sustainable going forward. So that's questions arising, which is beyond the technology sector. Two, the integration points. Jaise Mimi ne bhi kaha ki financial inclusion and digital access, that means the integration across industries. Retail, you have the banks, and then you have the telecoms. And the next is, what other industries are you? So the challenges over here is, are we equipping our next generation of human capital fast enough? And that is a greater challenge across sectors, across industries, across gender as well. And we need to be very focused on how are we enabling it. The last point I just want to highlight is a bit of a success story Mimi is also given. You know, I'm on the board of Kash Foundation as well, and where the women empowerment is one of the, obviously, the top priorities. And the amazing, heartening journeys and stories that we have the good fortune to hear about and even meet these remarkable women in semi-rural areas and semi-urban areas as well, is they took a loan 20 years ago of 5,000 rupees. Today, 20 years later, their children are educated. They have jobs, and not only that, they have been the first employers of their mother's small business that she started. So there's that financial acumen, business acumen, plus education, plus a drive to do more and contribute back. And we cannot disregard how that power of that 5,000 rupees has now panned out into building capacity for the next generation. So there's a lot of powerful momentum that is already there. It is up to us to take it forward and make sure they have that opportunity and that platform to really rise. So I just wanted to connect the dots.
Thanks. I think
if I can take the liberty, I won't take much time. I just wanted to add to that, you know,
we have 1 minute, Baliza, and then we have to go for
I'll
audience
take
questions.
just 30 seconds because I just want to, like, over here, you know, specify that I think these challenges are being recognized by the regulators, because this standard, SBP has come up with the Asan digital account, as well as I think the refinance
policy also,
credit guarantee, yes, that they're giving to the women entrepreneurs. So at the same time, I think we should give credit to our regulators who are recognizing these challenges, and I think it is on their to-do list, and they are coming up with some, like, you know, schemes and how they can, like, you know, empower women financially through these initiatives. So it is pertinent.
Yes, Muniza, but the challenge is that despite these policies, like the state bank policy, you know, the rollouts that's where the resistance comes.
Execution.
Execution.
I think part. So I feel the will is there, but maybe it needs to be, like, you know, more streamlined, basically.
I think that's required a more like a certain social pressure, and the citizens have to really go and ask for that thing, and then support as well, and leverage it and create those success stories which we are hearing. And then those success stories need to be projected so people can see the benefit. So if I understand correctly, so there's a role of a digital access, and then there's a pillar which is coming from a financial inclusion, but that financial inclusion requires a certain talent and skill development. If we try to have the financial inclusion or a credit for available, but not the talent, then it's not going to add value. The story which we just heard from Fatma, or the story we heard from Turkey, from Mimi. So I invite now everybody for the question. You can type your question. I have got a couple of questions already noted from the chat. The one question which came up is the one piece of advice, and I think I'll start with you, Jahara. One piece of advice for young women and men who are entering or they're starting their career. and particularly women, but I would add the men there as well.
So I think the one important thing to do is to make sure that you continuously learn. And there are so many opportunities now with access to the internet to upgrade your skills on a constant basis, because then whichever organization you join or you start, you will be relevant, you will be important to those organizations. And technology is changing so fast that unless you upgrade your skills, even organizations that are not technology companies are having to use technology to advance their businesses as well as their business growth. So I think that is the one piece of advice I would give: continuous learning. That's important for all of us.
Sorry to interrupt. I think I was not clear enough. How to handle the biases? So the question is more around one piece of advice for the young women and men who are entering into the career right now, how they will be handling the biases and how they will recognize and respond to those things.
So the biases, you have to recognize that they exist, and then you have to fight them nicely in a classy fashion, but you have to fight them nonetheless, because biases will exist as long as people don't understand that these biases are something that are holding us back collectively. So you need to make sure that your relevance, your importance to the organization is quite apparent, so that these biases will be pushed aside by everybody else within the companies in which you work. Because if you are useful to the organization, they will not allow biases to stand in the way of their growth. So I think you need to be sure that you are skilled enough, that people are aware that you're doing the work that you've been hired to do and more, and that by recognizing that, you can, they will benefit and not just you. So that's the way to fight biases, just to prove how capable you are, how important you are for the organization.
Thank you, Jara. I think there's a very interesting question there. What guidance can we give to young girls about networking? Informal dinners, the boys club, and patriarchal society make it a challenge for many female, and it impacts their career in the long term. So definitely networking, knowing people well, that's require a certain informal interaction. So I think I'll pick it up from Fatma first, and then I'll come to Muniza again, and anybody who wants to add further there. So I think very interesting question and very particular question, very practical issue.
Yeah, thank you. And you see, it all depends on where you are. I mean, I had a good fortune that I was part of an organization which required interaction with individuals from different industries as a professional services firm. So that enabled me to get to know more diverse points of view and sector and different levels as well. But when you're working in something which is very focused, the idea is to build that network from within. So start with your own organization. Don't look too quickly to build external networks. Working within, you can have a network which is beyond your own department as well. Finding out what the other teams are doing. How does it link up and add value to your own organization? Through that, then look at associations. I mean, the platforms which hold conferences as well, whether it's the Chamber, whether it is Nutshells, Zahid's platform as well, and try to link up with one, obviously register for yourself, go to those particular sessions as well. And right now, by the way, I am actually a bit envious of the next generation, because they have access to many people through these webinars, through these technology-based platforms as well. But as I said, start from your own network. And lastly, a great place to start networking is through your academic institution. Go back to them, start working with the alumni. So this is a few things.
Great. Muniza, as a partner, I'm sure you have to go through that. And Jahara, I'm sure like your overall business is to bring everybody together, and the networking is one of our key area. So let's, Muniza, let's quickly hear from you, and then we will get some comments from Jahara.
Yes, Sajid, building on what Fatma just said, I'd just like to summarize it. I think one statement says it all. Your network is your net worth. You know, I've
yeah,
always believed in that. You know, your network is always your network. These are very precious contacts that you make along the way. And but I have been at the bearing end of it, because, you know, when I started to network, when I first became a partner in the few initial years, I was just had my head down and, you know, processing all these accounts and audits and all. And then later on, I recognized the importance of networking. And when I did start doing that, I had people, you know, from my own profession, like, you know, I used to hear snide remarks like, when does she get time to do her work if she's networking like that? But, you know, I think, as I said, you just need to be resilient, because then I had those same people who used to point fingers at me come up to me and ask me if I knew that person and if I could have him arranged as a speaker, or, you know, if I could have their work, you know, processed through him. So the thing is, you know, you just, as I, you know, they've said, you need to be resilient and you need to know what you need to do. So if the networking is extremely important, and I think you need to have some, you need to spare some time from your schedule and allocate it to that. So it's very important that you remain in touch with the community that you come from, as well as the external contacts, you know, because this is what will, like, you know, have you recognized and also take you places. So it is extremely important step.
Thanks. Jahar.
Yes, so I would just add that I know many young women worry about the fact that social dinners is something that they cannot go to, and that it is not acceptable behavior from families, etc. But networking happens in many cases at universities during events, also events that professional events that are held, exhibitions, conferences. Be a part of that and don't just sit with your own group of people. Take the courage to go out, reach out to speakers, to other people there and say, hello, I'm so-and-so, and I would like to introduce myself and ask you this question. That's how the first relationships start. And I've seen that happening at conferences that I have organized, at conferences other people have put together, that this is where the networking happens. And young people need to take advantage of that, because unless they do, the social dinners, the golf tournaments and all that happens at a much later stage and for a very small number of people. The rest of us depend on these events, on university get-togethers, on alumni gatherings, as Muniza said, and especially at conferences that are organized, because the purpose of those conferences really is to bring people together. So I think that's a very easy way to start networking. And then once you find people that you have something in common with, or business-wise, or, you know, values-wise, then connect with them at a later stage and say, follow up. Follow up is something young people find difficult to do. Right. Send them an email, say, we met at such a place, and I would like to carry this conversation further. Could we talk about this particular subject? But make sure you ask for a certain amount of time, and you don't give them options for certain days where they might be available so that they can meet up with you. People usually make the time if they think that you are there for a specific purpose. Don't say, oh, I just want to meet you. You know, that's not enough. All right. So these are things that to keep in mind.
I think Hola raised a very interesting point, and Musharaf, I'll come back to you while you have raised the hand. And then we will ask all 5 panelists to have their recommendation in 30 seconds, please. So you have to be very calculated around the clock. And Musharaf, I'll give you a chance because you raised that. Hola raised one point that we need to develop certain understanding of the young man who are coming to the organizations, who may not be coming from the environment which is more diverse or which is more understanding. So I think that's also the recognition within the organization to create a safe place to really train those people how to act and behave in a certain professional environment. And I think that's also something which is a very important point, which is raised by Hola. And Musharaf, you want to add something there?
No, thank you. I quickly wanted to add something on the bias question you had asked earlier, not on network. I think this is a very, very key area, and perhaps this time we haven't had enough time to tackle this. But you know, when I was listening, I was saying and yesterday I was with Nestle in their sort of Women's Day thing, and there were 2 stats which they showed without citing the exact numbers. If we look at the total men versus women population, there are more women today who are enrolled in universities than men, which is excellent, and we all feel happy. The next stat they showed was when it comes to getting into the work stream, how many women get in and how many men, it reduces to less than 1/4. So what is really happening is a lot of women are going into educating themselves, but they fall off the mainstream of the workforce. Why? And this is where the whole bias issue also comes. It's not just a capability thing. They have the capability, they have the professional knowledge, but what is happening is they're not able to maintain themselves in the work stream. And to my mind, besides developing an enabling environment, which we've all talked about today, financial inclusion, digital inclusion, blah, blah, it is about biases. It is about what my mother-in-law is thinking. She thinks I'm not there to look after my child. I'm not there to greet my husband when he comes back from work. I have actually had women, and we are now talking of women from Ashra, who are talking about all this. And there are girls who come under so much pressure of these because of these biases that they fall off. These are real issues, my friends, where, you know, girls come and talk to us. And this is where the whole bias, so it's more than bias, it's a social, cultural barrier that exists. And women get intimidated. I'm sorry if I've taken time, but I think these are the less discussed subjects, and women get intimidated. So statistics on one hand, all the rational things are there. These are the emotional barriers. And these emotional barriers is what our group here of very competent leaders that I have seen here, we have to tackle that. I would love to have another session on this whenever you all.
We will. I think we will plan. But I think I'll pick up something which Muniza said initially in a very, very beginning when she was telling her story, turning a deaf ear to these things which are happening and the people are saying. So if you want to progress and you believe in yourself, you can't really get emotionally consumed in those kind of conversation. You have to just ignore it. 30 seconds and recommendation. Sorry, I think we are losing you again. I think while we are waiting for Musharaf, Fatma, if we can start with you, 30 seconds, 1 or 2 key recommendation for either the government, for the institution, or for the young women who are coming in the profession.
I would just focus on the next, the next line of women leaders as well as they emerge. And the amazing panelists and speakers have said that repeatedly. Be true to yourself and know yourself as well, but also give yourself margin to make those mistakes. It's all right. That's how we've learned. But do it with dignity and don't let anyone disrespect you in the process. That would be my advice.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. And Muniza.
Yes, Ajit, my advice would be like, these biases are going to stay along. I think it might take another lifetime or another generation where we see a bias-free world. So what my advice to the young women of today would be to be self-assured and self-confident, because if they're not confident about their own skills and talents, how can they let others place reliance on them? So self-confidence is the key. They must have the self-conviction and the self-belief. That's from me.
Thank you, Muniza. Jara.
So my recommendation is really for the government, open up the spectrum so that access becomes cheaper and better, work on privacy and confidentiality legislation, security policies without the intent to censor. Those policies should be for the protection of consumers and organizations and not for the sake of censorship. So these are my 2 key recommendations.
Thank you. Malia, if you can see.
So thank you. Yeah. So for me, I think the limitations that women have are mostly in their minds. So I think if we open up and we are convinced that, something that we set our minds to, we can do, I think that is very critical. I also want to touch upon the fact that biases will always be there, and I think that the biases that are there have to be we have to actually deal with them and address them. We have to raise our voice. So don't ignore it if it's there. Raise your voice against it. And the third advice that I would like to give is about the financial inclusion. I think a more holistic approach to financial inclusion of women will empower women, will create greater economic space for women, which is lacking today, and will also create dignity for women, which I think will have cultural impact and will change the perception of what roles women have to play. So those biases will also be addressed with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Musharaf is there. I think Musharaf dropped off. So thank you very much, audience. And we have seen a lovely conversation. We went from different areas, from a biases, from the success story to digital access, financial inclusion, talent development. And then definitely the one thing which coming as a common thread is it's okay to fail. If you doubt yourself, that's totally fine. Men does the same. So you don't have to be worried. And just make sure that if you are aiming for something, you go for that. And if during the way it's become tough, there's a challenge, there are failures, those are totally fine. So if I summarize the conversation right now, biases are going to be there. We do understand, but the more and more we talk about it, people will start recognizing it. And
Yes.
It's not only the women who will recognize it, it's the men who will start recognizing their biases, and they will get better in dealing with it. So it's a mutual learning there, but we have to create more awareness. So there's no area like Musharaf rightly picked up, those biases are embedded somewhere in our family and the social and cultural values. So we really have to challenge those fundamental beliefs and come up with something which is more acceptable for the upcoming generation. Otherwise, they will not find it fair and transparent, and they will feel suffocated. They are not the generation who can really live with that. They will react to that. So that's something which we don't want to create. And the digital is considered as one of the area which digital access, which bring more transparency and more fairness in terms of how the people and the women can really participate in the economic activity, become more financially independent, and they can develop their own skill, they can learn that, and they can start contributing towards economy. So I think this is the small summary. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much for panelists to taking out those today time. We really, really value that. And thank you, Zaid, for arranging all that 2 sessions. Lovely session, fabulous conversation. Really, really appreciate. Thank you very much. Have a very good day.
Thank you so much. This was really fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Thank you
before
very
we conclude, okay, so let's just one last moment, 1 minute. I'm once again thankful to the Sajid for maintaining the momentum and the energy to steer the conversation and the unique perspective by every panelist. So for us, Women's Day is not just celebrated on 8th of the March. It's an ongoing process. I mean, throughout the year, we engage in the various interventions. So hopefully we are going to connect face-to-face in Karachi on 26th of May. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we are in a process of finalizing and creating a directory of women for board. So we will be reaching out to more people, and feel free to let us know how you can be part of this mission. One of our now challenge and also the opportunity ahead is to compile all these thoughts and put it together to create more wisdom around all the circles. We would like to share the report containing the important findings and recommendation with all the stakeholders, and we'd like to take more time to make it more meaningful and more practical. Nothing else from my side. Thank you so much for being together. All the best. Take care of yourself, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Zahid.
And thank you, Riaz Fokasa, for your message.
Bye.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,